Hi everyone, I hope all of you are well, and here we are in our new online classroom. And so I want you to be sure and look at our D2L class page, because I do have posted our new introduction to our class online. And it's the title is School Begins Online Monday, March 30th. And so it lists for you what to expect this first week, because we are going to have to organize ourselves a little bit differently. But it's going to be great, and it will not be more difficult than what we have been doing. In fact, I think you'll find it probably easier. And one of the reasons is because our exams are going to be, wait for it, open book. So that ought to relieve some people and also make this much more user-friendly, I guess. And so this week we have 3 things that we are going to be doing, and I have them listed for you so that you can refer back to what we're going to be doing this week. And by the way, our class is going to be created in such a way that we will be, instead of doing like we had on our class calendar, Tuesday, Thursday, and all the different dates. Well, now it will be week of, and whatever the Monday is, then that will be what you'll be doing for that entire week. So you can do it in whatever order you wish. I would suggest that you watch my videos that I will be posting every week to let you in on, explanations and things like that, and then do the rest of the work that is going to be assigned to you. So instead of having your attendance grades in the classroom, which obviously we're not in the classroom, so we're going to do discussion board posts. Now, don't freak out, because it's not going to be difficult. I will give you a list of choices of what you want to discuss, and I'll give you guidelines, and that is where we will get our attendance grades there, your attendance points, rather. So that will be different as well. So this week, you will be doing a discussion board post, because we'll do that every week. And then you will be doing our exam number 2, because that got postponed. So that will be happening, and it's open book. And I will give you the page numbers for that. And then you will be listening to a bit of a little condensed lecture, little bitty. And it will give you some highlights as to what you want to be looking at and considering and reading, the readings for the week. So be sure and check out our D2L page, and the news items will come up first when you open up the class page, and then for assignments, like for tests and things like that, it will be under I think it's, what is it? Assessments, and then there's a drop down, and you just click on that, and it will have assignments, and we're going to do it through assignments. That's how our tests will be, our exams will be. So all that stuff, we used to call it in-class writings, but our historical person writings will be under assignments as well. I will also provide for you, and I'm sure it'll be in the news items, a more up-to-date class calendar, so that you will be able to see what's coming up. And again, it will be week of whatever the date, a Monday, and you'll have that entire week until Sunday at 11:59 p.m. to complete your work, your assignments, your DBs, whatever. And yeah, so it should be easy breezy, no problems. And I think we are going to have a great time doing this all on our own schedules. So that's the beauty of this, is that we are going to be working on these different aspects of our class, but you can do them according to however best fits your schedule. The trick is going to be time management. So you don't want to wait until late in the week and then all of a sudden you have all this stuff to do. So you want to keep on top of it, but at the same time you can do it any time of the day, any particular days, however best it works for you. So that is going to be awesome, I know, for a lot of you. Right, so we have our exam number 2 that we're going to be doing, and I'm going to be listing that under, again, assignments. And so that is going to be the same setup. It's going to be, true, false, multiple choice, fill in the blank, and then the longer essay question at the end. So that should feel good and, familiar to you. And so with that in mind, you want to have your book. It's very important. And the page numbers that you are going to want to reference for the exam number 2 are pages 39 to 64. So exam number 2 are pages 39 to 64. So those are the pages where you will look for your answers for exam number 2. All right. Now, going forward in our lecture time that we have, I want to point out some things for you to be sure that you've familiarized yourself with, that you've read through, because that is going to be key, so that you're not, when it comes to exam time, that you're not just having to read, every line, because that will make your exam experience not as sleek as you want it to be, and time conscious. Not that you'll be timed. It's not timed, so you don't have to start at a certain time and then I close it at a certain time. I'm not going to do that, right? But I would suggest that you sit down if you can, and do it, at one sitting, because that's going to be the easiest, because you can be concentrating and, looking actively instead of coming back to it. That's not going to be a good idea. So 64 is the page number where our second exam will end. Now, for new information, we're going to start on 64, and we start with the Pequot War. And so it's important to note here that this is another example of when the English settlers utilize the idea that if we can get other indigenous cultures to fight for us because they don't like the indigenous culture that we don't like, then we will be more of a force to be reckoned with. And so this happens here. And so you have the Pequots, who they are accused of killing a trader, not like a traitor, but a trader, a fur trader, because that's what was going on in this particular part of New England. And this sets off, it's called a war, but it really should be called a massacre, because it's not a fair fight by any stretch of the imagination. This happens in 1637. This is at the bottom of page 64. So the the idea is that you have this group of New Englanders who find out about this murder, and they are accusing the Pequots, which is a indigenous culture, of committing this murder of a fur trader. And so they are going to confront the Pequots and and make them pay for what they've done. They enlist the Narragansetts, which is another indigenous culture, and by doing this, they are able to exact a truly awful revenge. You can read about it there on page 64. They basically just go in, surround this Pequot village, and then just burn it to the ground. horrible, horrible massacre, really. But it is referred to as the Pequot War. So you'll read about that on page 64, 65. And then your book turns to discussing about how the merchant class rises in the New England society and the economy, and and what the New Englanders are doing versus what the Chesapeake area are doing. Because remember, Chesapeake area are Maryland and Virginia, and they are dealing with cash crops, primarily the first one. What was the first one? Yes, you're right, tobacco. So they're dealing with cash crops, and that's how they are making their colonies successful. But with the New Englanders, they are dealing with, look at the bottom of page 65, they are going into fishing and timber. And you might think, fish, what do you fish? How do you do with fish? Fish, they would dry fish. Dried fish, particularly dried cod, was very popular. And so they would ship that overseas, and it would keep because it was dried. So it was a very popular thing. And timber. Timber was very important because they were running out of timber in England, because England's an island nation and there's only so much land and so much timber, and so there was lots of timber in the colonies, and so that is something that was very popular also to send back overseas to England. And so they were concentrating on that. Now, they had a lot of family farms, family type industries who went out fishing, who, felled timber, and did things like that. And it wasn't these huge farming kind of industries like we have with the tobacco. And then later we talked about sugar, and then rice. We'll be talking about that. So we don't really have cash crops in New England. We have more of goods that they are trading and shipping. And so we have this rise of the merchant class. And so those are the people who make sure that things get to them, and then they get on the ships, and then they are taken to various places. One of the most busy ports that we have in this area, of course, is Boston. And so a lot of things are going back and forth through Boston, and we're seeing that people are able to make a really nice living. They're comfortable living versus what we have in Virginia, which are these a lot of times noblemen who came over, got lots of land, and then are farming these huge farms, later to be called plantations, of tobacco. I mean, they're the mega wealthy, okay? The people in New England are comfortable in their, more humble wealth, I guess you could say. Nothing compared to the Chesapeake area, but still successful. Okay, and so then on 66, there's a lot of talk about this society in New England versus the society that we have seen and we talk so much about in the Chesapeake area, and kind of reiterates what I'm discussing. There is a concern in New England that's not the same in Chesapeake area, which is this concern about religion and whether or not people are, it's talked about on 67 that they're backsliding, they're not as pious as perhaps they had been, or their parents had been, who came over here. And so because the New Englanders have their religion, their particular Puritan branch of Protestantism, and it interweaves a lot with their civic laws and so forth, practices. So it's a kind of a complex situation. So when you're accusing someone of not being as pious as they should be, you're also accusing them of perhaps not being as good a citizen as they should be. So it's a very delicate balance that is happening in New England versus the one in the Chesapeake area. And so you read a lot about that on page 67. And then we go over to page 68, which is telling us a little bit about what's going on in England at the same time of, for instance, the Pequot War and all of these ideas about religiosity and the rising up of the merchant class in the colonies. In England, they are facing a civil war where actually the Parliament accuses the monarchy of different corruption and mishandling of the nation, and also perhaps leading the nation back to being more tolerant of Catholicism. And remember, we talked all about that. So they have a civil war, Parliament, and then there's armies that rise up that are backed by Parliament, and they actually overthrow the king at the time, which is Charles the First, and they not just overthrow him, but they behead him. So there you go, no more monarchy. Now, he does have a son, Charles II, and Charles II will resume the throne after about 10 years. They have this kind of parliamentary controlled government, and you read about that on page 68, but it has its problems too, and so people decide that monarchy is better. And so they go back to the monarchy, and Charles II, he takes the throne. And so you have, during all this Civil War discussion of freedom and what constitutes, freedom and rights and civil rights and monarchy versus parliament and all of that, it does fire up a discussion of, well, what is freedom, and what can you do with freedom, and who should be, what kind of freedom should each person have, and what does that mean? And so it does plant the seeds for what will become the American Revolution and this wanting of freedom. And it's interesting to note that one of the things that everyone was so upset about that helped to spark the Civil War in England was taxation. And taxation is what is the catalyst for the American Revolution. So this taxation is, it sounds kind of dry and really, well, how important is that, and how does that affect people, and does it really make them that upset? Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. And so you have those ideas of freedom and what does it mean, and that's being talked about on pages 68 and 69. So you have those discussions, and one of the things that is also discussed in your book here in these last couple of pages is the idea of religious freedom. And Maryland does something very interesting. Now, Maryland was in a big bunch of trouble during this Civil War period because, remember, Maryland was was a proprietary colony that was given to the friend of the king and his son, and he was Catholic. And so Maryland was formed by someone who practiced the Catholic religion. However, there was always it was liberal in that you didn't have to be Catholic to be in the religion, but it was thought of that Maryland was a place that people could come from England who still wanted to practice Catholicism and were feeling very persecuted in England at the time. But they come out of the struggle and they create, you'll see at the top of page 70, it's in 1649, they create something called the Act Concerning Religion, or the Maryland Toleration Act. And that is where you have toleration of other religions. In other words, it says free exercise of religion, which is key. Does this mean that you can practice any religion? Basically, it's types of Christianity. It's not really, for instance, well, what would that be? Judaism. It doesn't really address Judaism at all, but it is that you can practice various types of Christianity, which was a big step forward in providing toleration of people and what they believe to be important. Now, that takes us through page 70, which is the end of chapter 2. Now, what I would like for you to do is I'd like for you to read on in chapter 3 and go forward and read, let's see, some of these things we have kind of touched on, but we haven't talked in detail. But I want you to read this week and familiarize yourself with pages 73 through 90. 73 through 90. So please read pages 73 through 90 to familiarize yourself with those pages, and then I will go over them and hitting some high points when I see you next week. So be sure and do that. And if you have any questions, any concerns, please email me and we will figure out the answer or find a resolution or whatever. So yes, everybody have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye-bye for now.